Before NORAD tracked Santa, they tracked something else. Most people know NORAD for one thing. Once a year, on December 24th, a joint US-Canadian military command tracks a sleigh, 8 reindeer, and a very jolly old man in a red suit. It's charming, it's harmless, but it's absolutely not what NORAD was built for. NORAD exists for one reason, and one reason alone: to make sure no one launches a surprise nuclear attack on the US without being seen. That's it. No ceremony, no mythology, no margin for error. At its core, NORAD is not a holiday tradition. It is an early warning system designed to give humanity a few minutes' notice before the end of the world. During the Cold War, those minutes mattered. The radar chains that fed NORAD, they weren't decorative. They were brutal, industrial. There were systems that were stretched across the top of the world. The Pinetree Line, the Mid-Canadian Line, and later the Jew Line. Thousands of miles of radar stations, all pointed north, because that's where the bombers would come from. Every blip on those scopes was categorized fast. Commercial, military, friendly, unknown. Now, unknowns, they were never funny. They triggered phone calls, alert levels, interceptor scrambles, and sometimes silence, where the analysts were trying to decide whether the next few minutes were going to matter more than any other moments in human history. Christmas Eve didn't change that. In fact, during the height of the Cold War, holidays were considered high risk. Adversaries were expected to exploit reduced staffing, relaxed alertness, and the human assumption that nothing was going to happen tonight. NORAD knew that, and so did the people who were manning the scopes. NORAD wasn't abstract back then. It was personal. Those radar operators weren't tracking symbols. They were tracking consequences, which brings us to the most important thing we need to understand. And that is, NORAD does not log unidentified objects casually. Anything that shows up on those systems without a known flight plan, transponder, or expected profile is treated as a potential threat. That is, until proven otherwise. So when we find declassified, partially redacted, or fully sanitized references to unidentified radar tracks logged on Christmas Eve, the question isn't whether someone misread a screen. The question is why those tracks were there at all. Because NORAD doesn't track stories. It tracks things it doesn't want to miss. And what showed up on those scopes was important enough to be kept redacted for years after all Soviet activity had been declassified. According to the official story, a young child nervously dialed the number expecting Santa and reached a military operations desk instead. The officer who picked up was a Colonel Harry Shoup. With children of his own, he decided to play along.
Don't you worry, Santa is on his way.
Word spread and more children called. Shoup assigned staff to answer the phones. Somebody added a map. And just like that, a tradition was born. The military leaned into it. The media loved it. The public, they embraced it. It's a story that gets told every December as proof that even the most serious institutions do have a human side. And on the surface, it's a perfectly believable story. Simple, harmless, exactly the kind of thing people want to hear during the holidays. But here's the problem. That story didn't add something to NORAD's Christmas Eve. It replaced something. Because CONAD didn't normally answer random phone calls. And it didn't casually reroute its operational posture, even for children. What's rarely mentioned is what was already happening inside those rooms on Christmas Eve in 1955. The radar scopes were live, operators were on watch, unknown tracks were being logged. That matters, because the Santa hotline didn't emerge during a quiet year. It emerged during a period where early warning systems were still raw, imperfect, and deeply tense. That doesn't mean the call didn't happen. It means the call happened inside an environment that already had reasons to be careful about what the public believed. And here's where the record gets thin. The widely told version of the story jumps straight from the wrong number to a holiday tradition, skipping over what CONAD logs from the actual night. No detailed radar summaries are ever shown alongside the Santa narrative. No operational context is offered. No explanation is given for why a military command centre was suddenly comfortable reframing Christmas Eve as playful. And that's convenient, because once you attach something warm and nostalgic to a date, you make it very hard for anybody to ask uncomfortable questions. Questions like, why were unidentified tracks logged in the first place? Why were some of those records later downgraded or sanitized? And why does December 24th keep showing up quietly in declassified materials decades later? The Santa story didn't erase anything, but it did something just as effective. It changed what people were willing to look for. The Santa story is what survived. The paperwork is what didn't. When researchers began combing through declassified CONAD and early NORAD materials decades later, something subtle but persistent started to surface. Log entries, timing markers, language that didn't belong in a children's story. Christmas Eve, late hours, uncorrelated radar tracks. The problem is not that these files exist. The problem is how incomplete they are. In several early CONAD-era documents, analysts note radar contacts that don't match any aircraft profiles. No transponders, no filed flight plan, no matching visual confirmation. In some cases, the tracks appear briefly, to move at abnormal speeds or headings, and then disappear. They are logged using the most cautious language possible. Unknown, unidentified, non-correlated, never explained. What makes this significant isn't just the anomaly, it is the timing. These references cluster around late December, specifically December 24 and 25. That alone wouldn't mean much, if it only happened once. But it didn't, and what matters here is sequence. The anomalous track appeared first. The public-facing Santa narrative appears afterwards. From that point forward, Christmas Eve becomes something else. Because once a date is associated with something whimsy, anything serious tied to it automatically feels out of place. Now, there is no document that says we invented Santa tracking to cover this up. That's not how systems work. What systems do is redirect attention, and once that story takes root, it becomes the headline. The files become footnotes, and footnotes do still exist. December 24, logged, downgraded, sanitized. If it happened once, it could easily be dismissed. But if it happened again, and again, then it's not coincidence. It is a pattern.
Whoa, what was that?
Christmas Eve, late hours. A radar contact enters monitored airspace from the north. There's no transponder, no filed flight plan. Now the speed is inconsistent with known bomber profiles, and that track holds long enough for it to be logged. But then it changes. The altitude shifts without a corresponding speed loss. Heading adjusts without the gradual arc that's expected from conventional aircraft. Interceptors are considered, but then they're stood down. The contact disappears. Now there's no crash, no explanation, no follow-up intercept report, and in later summaries, the event is reduced to a single line. Uncorrelated contact. No further action required. The original radar plot is missing. The second event occurs years later, under a different command structure with upgraded radar systems. Now, again, it is December 24th. This time, multiple stations register the contact. Cross-confirmation eliminates local sensor error. The object appears, briefly accelerates, then does something highly unusual. It separates, not visually, on radar. Two returns diverge, then rejoin before vanishing from coverage. This is not how weather behaves, and it is not how aircraft behave either. The incident is logged, reviewed, and later reclassified. Public-facing summaries downgrade it to anomalous atmospheric returns. The technical annex, where that claim would normally be justified, is not included in the release material. The third event is the most sanitized. By this point, NORAD is fully integrated with Canadian and US assets. Sensor fusion, better filtering, better discrimination, and still, on Christmas Eve, an object appears. Speed exceeds conventional air traffic by a lot. Trajectory defies normal civilian corridors. No identification response. The object is tracked and then lost, but this time, an explanation is offered, publicly. After review, we note that there were sensor artifacts, misinterpretations, albeit a little benign. But the language used internally is more cautious. Words such as unresolved, inconclusive, no threat determined, not explained, just dismissed. And that distinction matters, because NORAD does not dismiss threats lightly. When you place these three events side by side, the similarities are uncomfortable. Different decades, different technology, different geopolitical climates. Same date, same classification language, same outcome. All logged, all reviewed, all softened. If you wanted to design the perfect night to test the system without triggering panic, you wouldn't choose a random date. You'd choose a predictable one. And Christmas Eve is exactly that. From a military perspective, it's a paradox. The systems remain active, but the human layer, it changes. There's skeleton crews, reduced command presence. The assumption that nothing would happen tonight was itself the weakness. Civilian air traffic patterns also shifted. Fewer flights, cleaner skies, and because of that, anomalies stand out more clearly and paradoxically are easier to explain away. Because nobody wants to be the person on Christmas Eve to escalate something like that, unless it matters. Radar operators are trained to question their instruments, especially when something appears that doesn't fit expectation. On a night already loaded with cultural assumptions, doubt certainly creeps in faster. You don't want to be the guy who ruins Christmas, so you triple check, then you check again, and sometimes by then, it's gone. That doesn't mean NORAD ignores anomalies. It means the threshold for action subtly shifts, and that raises an uncomfortable possibility. If someone or something wanted to observe, probe or transit monitored airspace with minimal interference, Christmas Eve would offer advantages. Lower traffic density, predictable human behaviour, a built-in cultural narrative that discourages alarms, and most importantly, a story already waiting in the wings. By the time NORAD publicly reframed Christmas Eve as a tradition, the date had acquired insulation. Any further anomaly would be interpreted through that lens, not as a threat, but as curiosity, or worse, nothing at all. What's striking is that the anomalies don't stop once Santa's tracking becomes official. They just become easier to dismiss. And that brings us to the next question, the one NORAD's radar can't answer on its own. Where do these objects go after they leave the sky? Because radar can only tell you what happens above the surface. It doesn't tell you what happened next. NORAD's strength is also its limitation. It sees the sky. It does not see what happened after something leaves it. Radar tracks don't tell stories. They do, however, draw lines, altitude, speed and direction, until they don't. When an object drops below coverage, changes medium, or simply disappears from detection, NORAD's picture ends. And that's where this becomes incomplete, because in multiple cases, not just on Christmas Eve, unidentified aerial phenomenon don't terminate the way conventional aircraft do. They don't divert to airfields. They don't fade gradually at range limits. They don't correlate with weather systems. They simply either stop or disappear into the ocean. For decades, this was framed as a sensor problem, but parallel reporting from naval systems introduces a complication. Sonar operators, submarine crews, and surface vessels have all logged objects entering the water at high velocity, no impact signatures, without deceleration, and without cavitation. The same kind of characteristics seen in air-based anomalies. Fast, silent, unidentified. This matters because NORAD's radar doesn't differentiate destination, only presence. If an object transitions from the air to the sea, air defense picture ends exactly where the naval mystery begins. And those two worlds, historically, they didn't talk to each other very well. Different commands, different classification structures, different assumptions. Christmas Eve radar anomalies don't come with splash reports, but they also don't come with landing reports either. They leave airspace and then they're gone. Now this raises questions no official summary ever answers. If these objects weren't continuing through the sky, where were they going? The ocean is the largest, unmonitored volume on the planet. Even today, it is vastly under-instrumented compared to the airspace above. During the Cold War, it was effectively opaque. If something wanted to move through Earth's defense system while minimizing detection, the sea would be the perfect place. NORAD may not have been seeing unexplained visitors. It may have been seeing transitions, moments where something crossed a boundary our systems were not designed to follow. And that means that every single Christmas Eve, every time an anomaly was logged, the representation of it was only half the story. When people imagine a cover-up, they picture locked vaults and stamped folders marked top secret. But that's not usually how it works. Most information isn't hidden. It's softened. In military and intelligence systems, there are multiple ways to make a problem disappear without deleting it. You downgrade its emergency. You remove technical annexes. You replace precise language with vague conclusions. Unidentified becomes unresolved. Unresolved becomes inconclusive. And inconclusive becomes no threat. And once something is labelled no threat, the pressure to understand it simply evaporates. NORAD's Christmas Eve anomalies follow this pattern perfectly. The early records are cautious but specific. Radar contacts, timing, they're unusual. The characteristics the same. Later summaries remove the detail and only keep the outcome. No threat determined, no action required, case closed. Except it isn't, because no threat is not the same as explained. It simply means the system decided it didn't need to escalate. And that distinction matters, especially when you're dealing with something that appears briefly, behaves unusually, and then vanishes before it can be intercepted or identified. Those are the hardest cases to resolve, and they're also the easiest to sanitize. Christmas Eve provides a unique advantage here. Any anomaly logged on that date already exists in a cultural fog. Media attention is elsewhere. Public appetite for the alarm is low. A benign narrative is already waiting to absorb anything uncomfortable. You don't have to lie. You just have to redirect. Once Santa tracking became the dominant association, the psychological context changes. Analysts reviewing old material aren't immune to that. Neither are journalists, neither are the public, and neither am I. You don't have to erase the records. You just have to make it boring enough when nobody takes notice. And that's exactly what happens. No dramatic suppression, no smoking gun memo, just a slow reduction of significance until the event becomes academically uninteresting. But here's the catch. Sanitization works on individual cases. It doesn't work on patterns. You can downgrade one anomaly. You can explain away two. But when the same data keeps appearing across decades, under different systems, different operators, different geopolitical realities, that's when something breaks. Not the data, just the explanation. And this is why NORAD never offers a single unified answer for Christmas Eve anomalies. There isn't one. There's only process. Log it, review it, soften it, move on. And as long as each case is treated in isolation, the system holds, until someone lines them up. NORAD was designed to detect threats coming through the sky, fast, hostile, and unmistakable. It was never designed to explain anomalies that didn't behave like threats, but didn't behave like anything else either. And yet, year after year, one date keeps resurfacing in the margins. December 24, a night wrapped in assumption, a night softened by Christian tradition, a night when the world expects a story, not a warning. On paper, NORAD tracks Santa. In practice, it still tracks everything that crosses its sensors. And that's the part people forget. The radar doesn't know it's Christmas. The scopes don't recognise holidays. They recognise motion, speed, direction, and presence. Somewhere along the way, December 24, it stopped being treated like any other night. Not operationally, those systems stayed live, but psychologically, a narrative took hold that made anomalies easier to dismiss and harder to question. A sleigh replaced the unknown, a joke replaced a file, and once that association settles in, it becomes permanent. The unexplained, it never vanished, it just stopped being discussed. NORAD has never stated the anomalies logged on Christmas Eve weren't extraordinary. It has never stated that they were fully understood, only that they were not considered a threat, which leaves us with a narrow and uncomfortable gap between what was detected and what was explained. Maybe every one of those tracks has a mundane answer. Maybe it's sensor error, atmospheric interference, coincidence stacked on coincidence. That is possible. But if that's the case, it raises a different question. Why the same night? Because coincidence never repeats itself on schedule, and systems built to protect the world, they don't log stories, they log things they don't want to miss. So when NORAD tells you that it tracks Santa every Christmas, that part's true. What they don't tell you is that the tradition didn't begin in a vacuum. It began in a control room, already watching the scopes, already logging the unknown, already deciding what the public needed to hear, and what it didn't. And maybe that's the real tradition. Not Santa, but choosing once a year to look at the same data and tell you a softer story about it.
I'm home now, love.
Before we close the file on this one, I want to break protocol for a second. We spend a lot of time here looking for what's hidden in the dark, but today I want to remind you to look at what's right in front of us. I want to wish you all a very Merry Christmas, and a massive thank you to everybody who has officially joined the family by subscribing. This channel started as a signal in the dark, and you guys are the ones which will help it grow. In this line of work, we talk a lot about networks, but the most resilient network you will ever have. It's not digital. It's your family. It's the people who care about you. It's easy to get caught up in chasing the rabbit hole that we isolate ourselves in. We think we're protecting the truth, but sometimes we're just losing connection. So if there is somebody you haven't reached out to in a while, be it a parent, sibling, an old friend, pick up the phone and make the call. Send the message, close the gap. Because in a world full of static, human connection truly is the only signal they can't jam. But out here, they rely on you forgetting, on you clicking away. Don't do it. Go deeper down the rabbit hole with this next video. And to make sure the signal can find you again, join the network, click subscribe, here, and keep the light alive, not just in the search for truth, but in your homes too. For this is Thinkavarium.